This video is about education, specifically about internalism and externalism. So exactly what is externalism? Well, many sociologists have looked at the wider functions that our educational system serves in our society. This is what's referred to as externalism, looking at education from outside and beyond our schools and classrooms, and looking at education within a wider context. A structural functionalist approach to education, like the work of Talcott Parsons, looks at how education works to maintain social order, especially in an economic sense. Talcott Parsons saw education as serving three main purposes: making human capital, or large groups of people who were educated and had the skills that could fill job roles; allocation, dividing labor from an early starting point, deciding who would take on different roles in the industry, and thus the economy, and making sure that they were equipped to fill this role; and forming a common culture, so that everybody who has been through the educational system has an understanding of the same kind of personal values and morals. From this perspective, whatever talents you displayed early on in your education had a large impact on what role you would play in the economy in the future, and thus what role you would have in social groups. However, there is also a lot of criticism towards this way of analyzing the education system. These critics argue that there is a big difference between education being trained as human capital, and that education doesn't always have to lead to industry skills. We're also not only allocated our future place in the economy through our education. This idea completely dismisses how greatly our roles are defined by gender, class, ethnicity, financial situation, and other factors. As everybody also comes from such diverse backgrounds, trying to educate them through one experience and one system can be alienating more than it is uniting. Another approach to analyzing education is through reproduction theories, looking at how education exists to meet the needs of a capitalist society. This mainly came to light in the 1970s and was focused on by Bowles and Gintis. This is the idea that education maintains capitalism and different social classes through a hidden curriculum, almost like a hidden agenda. This hidden curriculum teaches and mimics the same values as are seen in the workplace. It does this through a few different ways. The first is by the actual structure of the school day. Breaking down the day into different periods and blocks, it means that students are often shifting in their peer group. This can be seen as beneficial when reproduced in the workplace. It means people are never together for too long, and so are less likely to unite and cause an uprising, such as in a union fighting against work conditions. Students are also monitored and supervised, just as they can expect to be monitored in the industry. Students are also taught to accept the authority of their teachers almost unquestioningly. This again is highly valued by employers. The education system encourages reaching grades for the sake of reaching those grades and for the sake of education, as opposed to learning to create or to utilize. This prepares students for the workforce where they will work to get money, as opposed to creating a tangible outcome. And finally, students who do all of the above are rewarded and favored, and this again emphasizes the idea that in the workplace, if you conform and comply, you will be promoted or rewarded. A large criticism of this is that it doesn't account for students' free will and agency. It implies that students and even teachers go along with all of this unwittingly, when in reality, defiance towards the education system does exist, as accounted for by challenging students and teachers. There are also theories that education functions to fill the needs of a patriarchal society. This follows similar lines to reproduction and capitalist theories. However, in this instance, the education system exists not only to prepare people for work or to enforce economic class structures, but to create a gender and sexuality-based division. In schools, we are taught to fit into the right gender roles, and these attitudes flow through to our roles in the economy and workplace. Another externalist approach is to look at how our education system, especially when looked at historically, has served the function of enforcing ethnic politics, particularly within Australia. By discouraging the languages and customs of migrants within educational institutions and also the curriculum, the government is able by default to encourage an Australian way of life. So what is internalism then? It's looking inside our classrooms instead of outside to examine differences in educational achievements. Instead of focusing on external factors, this practice focuses on what takes place within the classroom. Internalist studies are known for focusing on the self-identity of students, how a person's image of who they are, influenced as it is by peers, teachers, and wider society, can affect their behavior and outcomes at school. As such, Internalism focuses on how daily interaction can affect one's abilities within the education system. Labeling theory is one lens through which these interactions are observed. This theory states that teachers make a judgment about a student, which then becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Say the teacher decides one child is a failure or is less bright. They will then treat this child in such a way as to confirm the judgment. Studies have shown that teachers will show significantly more attention to those they deem brighter than those they deem to be less. With this understanding of labeling theory, let's talk about gender, ethnicity, and class, called the three giants within education. If teachers treat children they deem less able with less care, it's safe to say that gender and ethnicity will also affect their treatment at school. Historically, girls have been afforded less expectation and accordingly have underachieved significantly except in areas like home science. Three reasons for this have been identified: higher status within the education system going mostly to men, gender stereotypes within society giving women the expectation of lower success in certain fields, and within the education system and curriculum, how gender stereotypes are portrayed and upheld. Alongside this is the extent that prejudice against different ethnicities can come into play. Indigenous Australians face discrimination from all sides, with negative images built up around assumed social disadvantage. Alongside this are immigrant or first-generation children facing discrimination of their own. Class-based discrimination also has to be taken into account. Less opportunity and different educational focuses, for example more practical skills, as well as simple things like regional dialects can lead to class discrimination. Bernstein's code theory discusses fields of knowledge and how they're communicated. If a teacher is from a similar social background to a student, they will understand each other in a different way to someone from a different class stratus. There have also been interesting debates in America about the usefulness of educating students in Ebonics, or the students' vernacular. While some see this as a corruption of our educational system, others see this as diversifying so as to educate more openly. From a sociological standpoint, education is a complex and fascinating concept, one that has come into its own in recent years as standardized education has grown. We hope that this video has been educational.